Alex here with a high conflict child custody video on ending the conflict. And this is a video I've been holding off for a while now because it's going to replace so many videos. And the reason why is all of my thoughts over the past few years have been, I kind of like fragments of glass. And I think that they've been very helpful to people, but I think it's probably a good time now with all my experience in my own case with the completion of my docket series, which is probably going to be way more helpful to people than these general videos. And now with my, I guess, I don't know how many years now. It's been so many years since I haven't had to deal with any kind of litigation. 5 years? Geez, probably even longer. I don't even like to think about the past. It was bad. So I guess I'll talk about the videos that are being replaced now. Just like I do with all my other replacement videos, these are going to switch over to members only videos, but keep in mind there's nothing special about them. I just try to remove them from sort of I try to remove them from the general list so that they just don't confuse people. When I already have a new video with new ideas that are kind of summarizing my old ideas, I prefer that new viewers go to that particular video and not stumble into one of the old videos that I've already decided to kind of set aside. And yeah, if you're a member, you can also watch an old video if you feel like it. But let's go through the list. So number 1, evaluating mental health. Number 2, parental alienation. Number 3, alienation and abuse. Number 4, comparative alienation. Number 5, parental alienation pitfalls. Number 6, parental alienation discredited. Number 7, narcissistic personality disorder. Number 8, high conflict incompetence. Number 9, end of filings is not end of abuse. And that's it. Okay, so all those videos are going to be summarized in this video. I will talk about why I'm doing this. So a lot of the videos that I went through, mental health videos, parental alienation videos specifically, and narcissistic personality videos, are trying to answer questions that people ask. And I don't feel like those questions are relevant. I'm not even sure I want to say anymore. I'm not sure they were relevant at the time. People are trying to find out why their ex is doing what their ex is doing. And I think that if people can figure out why they're doing these perceived crazy things, they can figure out how to solve the litigation problem. They can figure out how to win in court. And I talk a little bit about this in the video, Your Ex's Motives. Please watch that video if you haven't seen it yet. Even though I'm not replacing that video, it really helps. I think it helps people understand why obsessing over their ex's motives is a distraction. And in that same way, these mental health videos, I feel, are also a distraction because when you're trying to come to the court with these labels, what you really do is set yourself up to fail. Number 1, you give yourself a higher bar because now you're not just trying to prove abuse and neglect. Now you're trying to say that, hey, they have this specific problem, which is why they're abusing and neglecting the child. So you've raised the bar for yourself. You've also given them an additional shield. If you're accusing them of being parental alienators or of having narcissistic personality disorder, and they are able to muddy the waters or confuse the court or even outright prove you wrong, oftentimes they will come forth with the defense of, yeah, I've been abusing my kid, but hey, I don't have personality disorder. I don't have any mental health issues. I'm totally fine. So everything I'm doing is okay. When really it's not. Really what matters is the abuse and neglect. I mean, if the defendant, or we'll say the non-movement, wants to figure out what their problems are, if they want to bring up to the court their mental health issues, if they want to say, I have a personality disorder and I'm in counseling or something, I mean, that's them. That's on them. Let them admit that they have mental health issues. Let them try and explain to the court why they did what they did. But it's not your job to do that. Your job is to say, hey, they're abusing and neglecting the child. Here's my proof of the abuse and neglect. I don't care what their issue is. They just need to stop. And if they won't stop, then the court needs to intervene and curtail their parental rights, period. So leave it to them to try and assert what their mental health issues are as a shield. Let them claim that they have problems that they're trying to work through. Because, if they legitimately do, it's great that they're admitting it. It's great that they're coming to the court and asking for mercy. And that's a strong indicator that they may actually try and get better. But when you go into court pointing the finger at them with all these issues, you just set yourself up to look like the crazy person, because a lot of people do that, and it frustrates the judges and lawyers a lot, especially the new narcissism label that's getting thrown around. And it's just going to set you into a position where you have to now stand apart from all the other thousands of people that are doing that. You're basically having to prove all this extra stuff that really isn't relevant. If you are dealing with an ex who is, I guess you're going to say, narcissistically abusive, show the court what the abuse is. Don't worry so much about the label narcissism. Show the court what the abuse is that they are committing, how that's impacting the child. Same thing for parental alienation. I talk about it in all those older videos. The idea of parental alienation as its own just thing floating around in the air is ludicrous to me. And what is the alienator doing that's hurting the child? Because I talk about this in the video comparative alienation. I talk about this in the video alienation and abuse, both of which are being replaced now. But really, the alienator isn't just giving the child a choice. They're not just telling the child lies and telling the child, hey, believe me, even though I'm lying to you. They're committing some kind of abuse to put a proverbial gun to the child's head to force them to alienate from the other parent. It's not like they're giving the child a force. Sorry, it's not that they're giving the child a choice. It's that they're coercing the child through abuse. And that's what you end up having to prove. Same thing as narcissism. So if there's alienation going on, pinpoint what the abuse is, prove the abuse. So you just back to square one with this video is if your ex is doing things that are abusive to the child, prove the things that are abusive to the child and don't concern yourself so much with those labels. So that really sweeps through the parental alienation issues and through the narcissistic personality disorder issue, really any mental health issue. You can, as I explained in the video evaluating mental health, which is being replaced, you can, for your own knowledge, in the back of your mind, kind of maybe suspect that your ex has certain issues so that you can sort of understand why they're doing what they're doing and what your approach should be. But bringing it up in court is not going to do you any favors. It's going to do the exact opposite. It's going to make it harder for you. If you want to learn more about this keeping your ex's motives in the back of your mind thing, I would suggest not even bothering with the evaluating mental health video and just go straight into the your ex's motives video. I feel like that's more relevant and more helpful to the viewers to look at that video instead. High conflict incompetence. I was on the fence about replacing this video, but I do think that I can summarize what's going on in that video in a way that is going to help you guys understand why the judges were having issues with pinpointing abuse and neglect and making difficult choices. My opinion is that in the old days, their job was a lot easier. There was what they called the tender years doctrine, and they, for the most part, would default custody to the mother. And in rare situations where she's abandoned the children or is a drug addict or is in prison or something, typically the mother would get the child, the father would give visitation and pay child support. And so I think that the judges from the past do not appreciate the new approach, the joint custody approach. And in their own head, they might say this doesn't work or this is bad for kids. But the reality of it is it's hard work. Their jobs were easier before. There was a default. Moms win, dads lose. Everybody sort of had this understanding, moms and dads included. There wasn't as much conflict because the court just automatically ruled in favor of the mom. And so if there was any conflict, it was not before the court. It was out of court between the parents. The court wouldn't even be aware of it. Now we have joint custody as a preference or a presumption or whatever word the legislature wants to use. There's a shift towards joint custody. And now there are two parents coming to court on equal footing, which means now the court is aware of the conflict because it's in their face, in the papers, at the hearings. Now they have to figure out how to solve the problem. I think a lot of high conflict incompetence came from the judges from the old days just not understanding this and not wanting to deal with it. Most of those judges are retiring or have retired. Some of those judges have been ousted in elections. The point I'm trying to make is, for the most part, they have either accepted the training and shifted over, or they have been replaced with new judges that understand the issue. And the new judges don't seem to be having, at least in Nevada, they don't seem to be having the issues with high conflict as much as the old judges had. Typically, you're going to have a much better experience now if you go to court with a high conflict situation, because you may get one of the newer judges who they just have a different attitude. Okay, there's conflict here. I'm going to pinpoint the conflict, find out who it is that's doing it, curtail their parental rights, and move on. And then just repeat it over and over again until they stop. In my particular case, The judge figured it out. They repeatedly curtailed my ex's parental rights until finally they terminated her parental rights. And now the conflict is over. It's horrible that that's the way that it had to be in my case, but that's the way that it had to be. And I guess that's what I'm getting to now at the end of the video. Ending high conflict requires litigation. Very unpopular opinion. But the problem, and I talk about this a little bit in High Conflict Incompetence, the problem is that this idea that it takes two to tango is a farce. It does not take two people to create a high conflict situation. It doesn't. It gets worse, or it's harder to fix it when both people are actively doing it, but one parent can very easily make a high conflict situation, even if the other parent is doing everything in their power to end the conflict. The high conflict parent who's addicted to the conflict can and will keep the conflict going. If they have to abuse the child, they will abuse the child. They will do it. And there are judges who are starting to figure this out. And unfortunately, in those cases, the solution is litigation. Litigation is the use of force, not necessarily violence, but it is the use of force. And a parent who is addicted to conflict won't stop unless they're forced to stop. Very similar to how there are some situations of drug addicted people who just won't stop. They're just addicted to drugs. Then they do something stupid. They get convicted of a crime. They end up in prison for 30 years and they get better. I'm not saying this always happens. There are situations where it doesn't work. But force is there when a person won't do the right thing because they're supposed to do the right thing. Why? I'm not going to talk too much about why they are obsessed with conflict, because I think I did a good job in the video, Your Ex's Motives. I will say this. My opinion is that a lot of the various different mental health issues that make it look like that's why the parent has the high conflict issues, in my opinion, that's just one of the myriad ways in which high conflict can come about. The real, at the end of the road, whether they have a personality disorder or some other mental health issue or they're alienators, at the end of the road, they are attached to this fantasy, to this story. They have, in their own head, created this idea that they are here to save the child from this other person. This is their role. They're the hero in their own story. And if you end the conflict, you erase that. And I think that is why, regardless of what specific mental health issues are going on, I think that in some way or the other, there's some variety of this going on. Or there's some kind of justification, some kind of revenge motive. The point is, there is this story, and if the conflict ends, the story ends. And if the story ends, their identity ends. And if their identity ends, they just... the idea, I think, is akin to death to them. To ask them to stop the conflict is to ask them to stop existing. And I think that's really, in some way, shape, or form, connected to every single high conflict parent. I don't know what the particulars, their background is, their childhood story. Those things can vary wildly. But at the end of the road, they've decided this particular thing is real. It's their reality. It's their story. And if they stop fighting with you, the story ends. They end. They lose their purpose in life. Maybe, something along these lines, as they're attached to this conflict because they themselves, that's them. It's not just a part of their life. It's them. It's the beginning. It's the end. It's them. And so to end the conflict with this particular parent is inconceivable to them. That's why I think high conflict doesn't stop. That's why I think so many people get frustrated. Again, guys, I talk about this more in the video, Your Ex's Motives, but I think that is the reason why it's an obsession and an addiction for them. And I think that's why, to stop it, you need litigation, because you just have to force it to stop. It's not going to stop on its own. Again, if you guys want to go into some of the details of how I got through it, just watch my docket series. It's a 200+ part series from beginning to end. You'll see my litigation. You'll see how the high conflict manifested itself in my case. All of these things are going to come out to you, because you can watch the actual filings, the actual hearings, and then ultimately the outcome. And so all of that stuff is there for you if you want to actually see an example of what high conflict child custody looks like. I do have one last video that I wanted to touch on, because it's also being replaced. And that video is the end of filings is not end of abuse video. That video points out a really wrong-headed approach by some judges that I think in Nevada is going the way of the dinosaur. I don't know if this is still a problem in your state. If it is, I feel bad for you. This is what I had to go through in my case, and this is why my case took 8 years to resolve. Because my judge had this idea that if you keep on filing things, it's really bad. And if you stop filing things, then you must be doing great. And this is just the way that he thought, which I guess a lot of judges thought this way. Um, oh, look, they finally stopped filing things. So they must be hunky dory now, and everybody must be happy, and the kid must be doing great. No. What happened is the protective parent gave up, and now the child is being abused into oblivion. That's what happened. And that's something that I think a lot of the judges are starting to figure out, not just in Nevada, but across the country, is that you can't just coerce the parents into going away if you want to end the abuse. You can coerce them into going away if you want to not do your job. If you're lazy, if you don't have time, if you don't care, if you just want to get rid of people, then yes, you can coerce them into going away. It doesn't mean the abuse is going to end, though. The abuse will continue, and the child will continue to be abused. So this video, I talk about this problem with a lot of the judges. You could get hit with attorney fees, you could get hit with a vexatious litigant order, and it's unfair, and all you can do is learn as much as you possibly can about how vexatious litigant orders work, and as much as you can about attorney fees so that you can defend against them. There's another video on that topic, because you're just going to end up having to go toe-to-toe with that judge like I did in my case. One of the reasons I won so many appeals is because the judges just had these preconceived notions in their mind, these biases that were incorrect, and I had to go over their head to the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals to get them to fix the mistakes that my family court judges were making. I really hate to imagine other people having to go through that, because it is very stressful and it's demoralizing. And then your child suffers, because now your child's suffering more abuse because the judge doesn't want to do their job. But anyway, guys, seriously, all I can do is explain to you that this is a thing. There is no secret way to get around it. You can't just force your judge to understand that they're thinking this way. Even you just can't. You're just going to have to learn how to appeal, learn how to confront the judge, and twist the judge's arm to get them to do the right thing. Because if you're dealing with one of those judges, you are just going to have so many problems. So it's better that I talk about it and say that this is a problem that exists than I just don't mention it to you, and then you just don't understand what's going on and why your judge doesn't get it. If your judge does not get it, if they don't like that you're filing a lot of stuff, because they think that that means you're the problem. That was a thing from the old days, where the litigious parent was typically conceived or perceived to be the abusive parent. Then all I can say is the judge is wrong, and hopefully you find out how to confront their decisions and go over their head. So again, guys, the end of filings is not the end of abuse. It's not. The end of abuse is the actual end of abuse. Usually court intervention. Usually that's what does it. But I mean, that's really the beginning and the end of this terribly wrong-headed approach that a lot of the judges used to take, that a lot fewer judges nowadays, at least in Nevada, seem to have an issue with. So, I mean, I'm still going to replace the video. If you really want to get into the weeds on that, just try to open up the video. It's going to go into the original playlist now, and you can watch End of Filings Is Not End of Abuse if you really want to. I think the family court is the front line that nobody realized. I think that you have a lot of cases where kids are abused, neglected, or they're just not given the best possible upbringing. And CPS can't always help those kids. There isn't. They have a very difficult standard. They have issues with taking the kids away from parents and putting them with non-family members, who then themselves may also have issues and may not raise the children well. And the family courts are, I think, more able to help in these situations, because there are situations out there where there are two parents and only one of them is a problem. There are situations out there, or where one of them may be just reacting to the other parent, and so they kind of seem like they're also in bitter and all that, but really they're just reacting, and the child can be placed with them, and a lot of the problems can be solved. So I do think that family court judges in these ordinary child custody and divorce cases have way more power than they think they do to rectify some of society's ills, by actually putting in the effort, looking at the evidence, pinpointing who the abuser is, and giving the child to the other parent. I don't want this video to end on the note that I don't think joint physical custody is the best approach, because I still think it is. I think that even though in my case I had to terminate my ex's parental rights, I still personally feel that joint physical custody is the correct default position. I do think that that is probably where most kids are going to get the best of both worlds if they have two healthy, functional parents. But that being said, there are going to be exceptions. There are going to be, I wonder what the percentage is. Is it 10? Is it 15? Is it 20? It would be interesting to see if there was some kind of study in the works out there on trying to actually figure out what's best. I do know that joint physical custody definitely trumps this idea that stability with one parent is better. I don't agree with that. Joint physical custody, I think, is the way to go, and I do think that some judges are just going to have to, hold these trials, consider the evidence, and pinpoint who the high conflict parent, who the high conflict parent is, the abusive parent is, and curtail their parental rights. And I think that the more judges that figure this out, the more a lot of these really unfortunate situations will get prevented, because CPS is just so constrained, and placing the children with non-family is oftentimes super risky. If you have a situation where you have a terribly abusive or neglectful parent, and you find the other parent and they're the biological parent and they haven't done anything wrong, that's a great way to make sure that that child is in a happy home, because that's still a blood parent. And maybe they just weren't aggressive. Maybe they just weren't assertive. Maybe they just weren't the dominant one in the relationship. Maybe they were shy. Maybe they didn't have the wherewithal to litigate. But they're there. They're alive, and they're capable of raising that child. And I think with some effort, attorneys/judges can figure out those particular situations, sort those situations out, and then make sure that that's the parent that gets to raise the child. But I don't want to go too far into this area, because this is just a video on ending the conflict. And with that being said, if you guys have any questions, feel free to post those questions down in the comments below, and I will see you guys next time.